What level of danger have you experienced? And have you ever had to trust your intuition in that danger? Well, in today's conversation, I get together with Dylan Warter. He's the former New Orleans SWAT detective, so he knows a little bit about danger. We get to talk about firefights and fear and all of these scenarios, grief, loss, not knowing what's next, and leaving a job that you have worked your entire life for. Dylan's story is a testament to what it means to follow your intuition. And this dialogue, because Dylan now is an entrepreneur and relationship coach helping men cultivate a harmonious and fulfilling relationship through healthy masculine leadership, will help you understand how to use and leverage your intuition, how to listen to it, and most importantly, the role of courage in expanding your role as a leader, as a man, or if you're a lady listening to the show, in your communication. Dylan offers a lot of value, and I know this crunchy tactical episode is going to move you as we work through grief, loss, and finding a way to make all of it make sense. Welcome to the show, Dylan. I'm excited to dig in. So, you got history in SWAT, entrepreneur, detective, like relationship coach. There's a width to you that I'm excited to explore a little bit. The first question that I have is, given that you've got some SWAT experience, do you have any crazy, cool, like badass stories? Like, is everything in SWAT world like the Expendables?
I have an endless amount of stories. The majority of what I did while as a police officer in general, not only just on the SWAT team, was really, I got to experience everything that I grew up seeing in the movies and way more. So lots and lots and lots of car chases, foot chases, fighting guys over guns, trying to kill me, getting shot at, all that. So, it was a very eventful 5 years where I got probably more experience than most get in an entire career.
No doubt.
Yeah.
When you're in those moments and your adrenaline's pumping and it's solid fear and you've conditioned yourself to not like fall prey to fear, are you able to consciously make thoughts, or is it just happening so fast that it's like instinctual?
It's instinctual. Yeah, it's usually there's reflection afterwards where I was like, oh, that was close. That was like, I almost didn't go home. But during it, there's only been a couple of times, and actually closer to the end of my career, where like in the moment, I'm like, this is not good. Where I'm like standing on the other side of a door, and I got 4 or 5 dudes in there. They're all wanted for multiple murders. They got rifles, AK-47s, AR-15s. The house is made of paper mache, and I'm just waiting for rounds to start flying through the door. And I'm just on the other side, like hoping that it doesn't hit me in the face. Really, like that was probably one of the main times, and that was actually the same time that my cover was blown, and it led to me like walking away from my job in the prime of my career. So yeah, there's times where it's happening right there, and like you're thinking about how dangerous it actually is, but only a few times throughout my entire career to actually experience that.
One of the things that comes to mind, I'll give you context to this question because I think it also connects to entrepreneurship, and who knows, we may end up there later. Whether it be childhood or sports or entrepreneurship, when you're wired for chaos to feel normal, it then gets really uncomfortable to be at peace. And there's this old adage, it's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. But when you're in situations like that where there's so much intensity and there's so much danger and there's so many threats and you're paying attention to everything around you and you're casing guys and you're trying to be so hypersensitive to everything in the environment because everything matters at that point. How do you then come down and settle to where you can just be and you can just sit and feel safe? Does it ever go away, or are you always on high alert still?
I'm not as much anymore. I definitely, while I was on the job as a police officer, there was no relaxing. I was working pretty much 24/7, even if I was home for the most part. I was, on Instagram with fake accounts, like working on trying to buy guns from dudes, And there's a lot to that story of why I was working so much to distract myself. But to your question, I was trained myself to be prepared for something bad to happen. And so after being prepared for something bad to happen for so long, once I walked away from my job, I had to learn how to prepare for something good to happen in my life. And that took a lot of work. It took a couple of years of like really trying to manually rewire my brain to like really like catch thoughts and the what if scenarios playing in my head. And a lot of it was I was dealing with PTSD, but it was something that it now I'm able to still be aware of my surroundings and be very confident in my ability to handle something, but I'm not like waiting for it. I'm not like anticipating every single scenario that could take place. So I'm able to like operate in peace to some extent.
What were some of the things you did to progressively move towards the ability to be at peace and look for things that were good and not feel like the shoe was going to drop?
I really think cold showers was a huge part of my ability to, I think cold showers is a huge part of my ability to work with, even with my PTSD and my ability to gain control over my mind. Really, what I did was my first time I did 75 hard, I decided that I was also going to work in cold showers and it had to be within 5 minutes of being awake. So I added it to it. So if
hey, that's fast.
Yeah. So what I did was I charged my phone in the bathroom and I put the alarm for 4:40 a.m. And as soon as it went off, I'd jump up, I'd walk into the bathroom, I'd close the door behind me, turn the alarm off. And what I did was I would wait until what I refer to as my bitch voice, right? I'd wait until it was about to win and talk me out of doing it. And right when I was about to break, that's when I would force myself in the shower and basically prove to my mind that I'm in control. And by doing that over and over and over again for 75 days, now it's been 4 or 5 years for the most part, intentional cold exposure. But that played a huge role in my ability to gain control over my mind. And so then it was a matter of catching those negative thoughts and actually stopping, thinking of what the opposite of that was, and then pivoting towards a positive, looking for a positive thought.
That's awesome. I have a friend that wrote a book on cold showers, and what he wrote was specifically targeted towards addicts,
Sure.
And how similarly learning to combat your thoughts where the natural and conditioned behavior is to go to what is easy. Cold showers could be a great change there. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I see it as, so it's interesting with like subconscious reprogramming and all these different kind of techniques that we utilize to create change in our behavior. The way I see a lot of the subconscious reprogramming techniques, there are coaches out there, they use a technique that what I see is it creates a break in the neural pathway so that they can pave a new road, right? A new path. But they don't typically follow it up with the right actions afterwards to actually pave that new path. But if you actually think of it like a path in the woods, eventually if you start taking this new path, this one becomes overgrown. Or you could take it once in a while, but as long as you're taking this new route more often, then eventually it starts to become overgrown. And if you could do it enough times, then it disappears. And now you have this new path that is much easier for you to travel over and over and over again. So for me, even if I had, in the middle of the day, I had negative emotions or a moment of PTSD, like a episode you can call it, I would go take a cold shower. And I would use it as this trigger to give me the opportunity to take this new path if I was struggling with it. And then over time, that practice just became second nature. And then all of a sudden I found myself oh, wow, I'm not struggling with this anymore. Oh, wow. Even when I have a moment of PTSD, which for me looks like I could be out in public, I could be with friends, I could be walking down the street, and between me and my actual reality, there's another screen that's playing a scenario. And before, it would bring all the emotions. Like, I'm seeing a guy come out of the window with a gun, and I'm walking with a friend in real life. And in my head, I'm playing the scenario where I'm like pushing him towards the car, so then the guy can't shoot us as easy. And this whole scenario is playing out. Adrenaline is rushing. And eventually that would last half a second, like maybe 30 seconds. And it wouldn't take me out of my element. It wouldn't impact my entire day the way it used to. So it was a really powerful practice.
Man, talk about getting out of your own way. The idea of a new practice is big for all of us. And in the way I think about behavior, choosing something new is not complicated. It's just hard. It doesn't take rocket scientists to figure out what behavior you might want or what might be connected to the future that you want or the result that you want. It's just uncomfortable. That's just what it is. Like a cold shower. Like, there's nothing fun about it. I started cold plunging every morning, and people are like, "Oh man, is it awesome?" And mind you, I also don't want to be one of those Graham guys that like every morning is like, "Yeah, it's my life." But it's not fun. It's not fun. It's the pun is here, but like, it's not cool. Like, I don't get up and I'm like, "Yes, I love this." That's not the point. The point is that it's not fun and that it's hard. And it does, I think the practice of that is a great way to make change.
Yeah.
You've had to go through multiple different iterations of change. And one of the particular ones that I want to lean on has to do with your history with your partner, because that was a significant bit of change. Not just the loss there, and I want to dig in there, but also like how you had to rebuild you. That to me is the most honorable story that we can all go through, is after loss, whatever the loss is, we rebuild ourselves. So can you share with me the story, and then I'll dig a little bit on it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was 2.5, maybe 3 years into my career, and it was October 13, 2017. I hadn't taken a day off all year, besides the maybe one day that I was given off. And I took off to go to my cousin's bachelor party. And I'm sitting in the middle of Talladega Speedway around a bonfire, having a beer. And my phone is in between my legs on the ground, and my lieutenant's name popped up. She was calling, and my heart dropped. I didn't know who, but I knew that someone was shot. Like, she knows I'm at a bachelor party. There's no reason for her to be calling me. And I answered the phone, and she told me that my partner, Marcus McNeil, his nickname was Milk Dud. He's black with a bald head, and the street gave him the nickname Milk Dud, trying to make fun of him, but he just owned it. And she called and told me that he had been shot in the head, and he was covering my spot that night because I was off, and told me he didn't make it. And I was drinking at the time, and I didn't stop drinking for 150 days straight. 5 months, from October 13th, that night, till February 14th, 2018, I drank every day. I drank myself to sleep, cried myself to sleep every night. I carried a lot of guilt and anger, and entered a cycle of self-destruction in many ways.
Was there hope on the other side of that, or was that just survival without hope?
At first, no. There was no hope of anything. I was just like, I'd go to work and do a great job at work. So I'm still getting awards. I'm still making a name for myself at work, all this stuff. But on my way home, I was stopping and grabbing a bottle of whiskey. I was pulling up in front of my apartment, and I would sit there and drink and cry for a little bit before I went into now my ex-fiance. And I did that for 5 months. And I think a part of it was that I felt so bad like just overall internally, everything felt so heavy that I was afraid of what it would feel like if I sobered up. And yeah, I put on 50 pounds. I was walking around 50 pounds heavier than I ever been in my life. I stopped working out. I couldn't sleep more than an hour or two a night. And just overall was getting to a very dark place, really spending most nights staring at my gun, wishing it was me and debating if it should be.
Yes. Yeah, it's heavy, especially when that was the one moment you had to break, to take a rest. And that makes you think twice about everything.
Yeah.
When I haven't had the same experience, but I have lost some close friends. One of my friends was murdered on Valentine's Day, and I think that had a sobering effect. And interestingly, I also numbed for a long time after that. When you think about numbing and you look back at that moment, what was the catalyst for you to say, okay, enough? It sounds like you got a mask on at work, and then the numbing was just another mask of like I just don't know what to do. And you can describe your emotions to your own extent, but at what point was it like, I don't want to do this anymore? Like, I'm done with this.
I really think that it was my relationship. My relationship was falling apart, and it was all because of me. It was because of, she gave me so much grace. She tried to help me and hold space for me and give me the time that I needed. And I wasn't making progress. I was just doing the same thing every day. And she came to me and asked me if I wanted to do a 40-day challenge of like no alcohol, get back in the gym. It was this whole thing. And it was like the time of like Lent, which I don't fully know, but it started on Valentine's Day. So it was kind of like my Valentine's Day gift to her. And realistically, I knew, I never knew what depression was. I didn't understand it. I was just like, why don't you just be happy? Like I had zero understanding of it. And then all of a sudden I found myself fully depressed and in a way suicidal. I stopped operating safe at work. I was chasing dudes with guns and I was staying on the gun side. So usually like if you're chasing a dude with a gun, you're going to play to the opposite side of the gun because he goes backwards to shoot you, not like this. But I was running to the gun side. I was, car chases 110 miles an hour down side streets by myself when I don't have backup. They'd crash the car, 4 dudes like 15, 16 years old, just jumping out with guns. And I'd run into the block after them instead of creating a perimeter and calling for backup, all sorts of stupid stuff. And yeah, it just got to a point where I was like, okay, I'm going to end up dead if I don't change. And sure enough, she asked me to do this challenge. And that was kind of the catalyst to like bring it down a notch, but it wasn't what really got me to fully start to change and get myself together.
It's interesting that I had to Google it because I also didn't know. We're like smack dab in the middle of Lent right now.
Interesting.
Pretty wild.
Interesting. Yeah.
So that catalyzed some change, but change is uncomfortable. It sounds, at least on the outside, with very limited information. So this is inquisitive, not assumptive. It sounds like you had been navigating this hardship in unhealthy ways and come to this conclusion that it's got to change through her. But that it's like a train that left the station a long time ago. Like it's meant to collapse into you, and it's just been like deferral. Was there a huge overwhelm once you did stop drinking, that all the emotions just hit hard?
Sure.
All the grief hit hard?
Yeah. It turned into me punishing myself in a different way. So I stopped punishing myself with alcohol and I started punishing myself with playing the body camera footage in my head over and over and over again. So after it happened, I got back to New Orleans. I watched the body camera footage. I actually just made a post about this the other day. And I watched it over and over and over again to the point where I couldn't unsee it or unhear it. Like I could watch it right now. Well, you and I are right here. I can see the entire thing. And I used it as a way to punish myself. I'm sorry, what was your question?
Yeah, was there just like a collapse of all that from not having dealt with it for, a year or a long period of time of just drinking?
I think that throughout the 150 days of drinking, there was a lot of mental breakdowns and crying. So in a way, I may have still been processing just very slowly and like baby steps, because I was very emotional. And I'm now with what I know about, men, hormones and everything, my testosterone is probably destroyed. I'm drinking all night. I'm not sleeping. Right. Then I got cortisol just like coursing through my veins on a daily basis. So yeah, like I was emotional. And so I think that there was some like baby steps processing that was taking place. And then when I became sober, I think I felt the weight, but I just knew that something had to change. And I think simultaneously, that's when I got wind that they were going to try to bring me onto the SWAT team. And that was another reason to like really get myself together and make sure I'm getting back in shape and everything. Because if I get the call and I go to test for this and I fail, and this is my dream job, then the level of disappointment and how heavy all of this is going to be on me is going to be 10 times worse. And I know that. So there was like this mix of things that made me really I remember pouring out, I actually just found the video a couple weeks ago of me pouring out all the bottles of whiskey that I had into the sink. And I just I couldn't have it around because I was coping with it so badly. So it did not really, it didn't all come collapsing in. And I think it's probably because I numbed for so long. So those baby steps probably helped it not become this thing where a full mental breakdown. It was more so a mental breakdown every day.
Yeah. Woohoo!
Yeah,
yeah. I can appreciate all of that, and it is really cool to be on the outside, hearing that story, looking at what you're doing now, because it certainly has its honorarium to him. It may not be directly tied to the same work or the same mission, but I'm sure that even just the way you talk about it, that there's an honor done to him and your relationship for sure.
Yeah. It wasn't for another year, probably, after I even left the job as a police officer, where maybe even 2.5 years, that I started to get to a place where I felt okay with it not being me that night. And once I started to feel that, then there was this interesting battle with the idea of letting go of the guilt. There was guilt that came with the idea of that. That almost became heavier than the original guilt itself. And that took another year to work through, maybe even 2. Me going back to New Orleans, talking to the guys, seeing how they felt about me, talking to his family, seeing how they felt about me, and everybody giving me so much more grace and love and never judging me, never blaming me. I was the only one that ever blamed me. And the guys that were there that night, they blamed themselves too. Everybody has their own story of why it was their fault. And most of them still are battling with it today because they haven't removed themselves from the environment. They still have to drive past the street that it happened on every day. And so now I'm in a place where I have immense gratitude for everything. And I know the amount of stuff that I've been through throughout my entire life, every single one of them has increased my ability to relate to more people and serve more people. So how could I not be grateful for it? Because if I didn't experience it, if I didn't overcome it, how could I serve a person that comes to me and has that problem? I couldn't. Not the way that I can now.
Yeah, what a great way to summate how to get past guilt. To almost leverage the experience to help others. Because guilt to me has always felt like an enclosed box full of mirrors. I'm constantly looking at me if I feel guilty, right? This is my weight, my burden, my cost, my flaw, my mistake, etc. But to turn that outward and say, hey, I can actually use this to help somebody else feels like a really cool way to pivot that.
Yeah, it's interesting because guilt is it's like taking responsibility, but instead of responsibility, it's taking shame. So it's like it's all my fault, but in a very negative way, in a detrimental way, not in a way that could serve you. Where if you could just take responsibility for the part that you did play, right? And then in some of these scenarios, it's very difficult to navigate and even draw the line between the two. But yeah, I agree. That's the whole box of mirrors thing. I'm like getting a very intense like visual right now. That's something that is, gosh, it brings up even some emotion. I feel like that's a very good way of putting how I felt for a very long time. It's also interesting because it's the moments in the mirror that are what truly brought change for my life, right? Two separate moments in the mirror actually were huge catalysts. The first one was at the end of my career. I found myself standing in the mirror looking at a man that I did not set out to become. I found myself looking at a man I didn't believe in anymore, that I was disappointed in. And 210 pounds. I'd been walking around at 165, 170 my entire life. And I very much was flirting with death daily. And I knew that it was either going to be somebody else's gun, my gun, or I was still drinking at the time. So alcohol, like I wasn't healthy. I got my blood work done. They thought my liver enzymes were at such a level, they thought that I might have hepatitis. That's how unhealthy I was. And so I had this moment in the mirror, and leading up to that week, my cover was blown, and they had put out on me, and they figure out where my now ex-fiance worked, where she went to school. All this stuff kind of like came crashing in, and I just realized like, it's time to go. It's time to go. Like, I am in the prime of my career, dude. Like, if I'm one of the best, if not the best in New Orleans Police Department, and those are other people's words, right? I'm making a name for myself. Have been for a while now. I'm a decorated detective in the best unit. Like, there's not really anywhere up from here besides like liaison with the FBI. And I got to go. And I have no idea what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. But I can't do this because I will absolutely destroy myself and everybody around me.
Dave, that's so great. Like, not great.
Yeah, no, I get it.
It's great to have, like, if there is a quintessential concept that we like to talk about here, it's this. Getting out of your own way in that moment wasn't staying, it was leaving. So I get why you had to leave. It was destructive and toxic. But on the outside, everyone else thinks the opposite. Was that a difficult choice to make because of everyone else? Had you just like not cared? Like what was going through your mind when you're like, dude, this has to go?
I was definitely afraid of what all my guys were going to think. I was afraid what the SWAT commander was going to think. That was the only man that I'd ever like really looked up to, respected, and was like slightly intimidated by. Like, there's a 6'6" Marines, got probably 28 bodies under his belt. He benched 500 pounds for his 50th birthday. Nobody messes with him. He is like He's just kind of like the man, you know, and I just respected him, and I loved him as a leader. And I knew that those other 22 guys in my unit on the Tiger team, they chose me. They all stood around a table in the war room. They all questioned me and interviewed me. And the SWAT commander was right there in my face, asking questions, scenario questions. And they all chose me out of everybody else in the department. And a year later, I'm walking away. And so I was definitely afraid of what everybody else is going to think. That was probably the most difficult thing, because like intuitively, gut was screaming, dude, it is time to go. And the logical brain was absolutely battling. But at the end of the day, I couldn't, my logical mind couldn't out scream my intuition.
So I want to dig on that, and I want to dig on that specifically because I have, in way too many scenarios, found ways to supersede a very loud intuition. And some of the deepest regrets and worst choices I've made for both short and long-term reasons have been a violation of my own intuition, outdone by a logic that's fundamentally flawed. And it is such a curiosity of mine how we as human beings can do that. I understand that there are reasons, but I'm curious to know what keeps us from trusting our intuition, and what keeps us stuck when we know what we need to do, but we use our logic against ourselves. What's happening?
I think that there's there's fear, there's a lack of faith. I think maybe even a lack of courage, potentially, because I do think that in order to trust your intuition while you're building a relationship with it, it requires courage. It requires feeling the fear of trusting this, even though logically it makes zero sense, and taking the action anyways. It's really like intuition. Some say that it's the authentic voice of God. And in my mind, whether it's intuition, God, the universe, it can tell you which direction to go, but it can't force you to step. And then step again and step again. That part's on you. And so that requires courage. That requires leaning into the fear. That is the one thing that I will say I took from policing into entrepreneurship. And my business partner, who was also a police officer, he brought into entrepreneurship. I think that has been very valuable for me, is being able to use fear as a guide, especially when it's fear of following my intuition, because then it's even stronger. It's literally telling me right where to go, and all I have to do is step. And I think the time in which we take or don't take to make that decision and take that first action is very important. I think that the faster we can take that first step, and so like I feel my intuition, I got to go. I did it with my hair. I cut my hair off maybe a month ago after having it for 6 years almost, no haircuts. And I was standing in the mirror, and I just I was like brushing it out, like annoyed. And all of a sudden it just came over, and I'm like, it's time. It's got to go. And I literally just told Donna, you got to cut my hair tomorrow. She's like, "Want me to trim it?" I'm like, no, it's coming off. Like, figure out how long it's got to be for me to donate it. It's coming off. And I'm telling you, it was the end of a 5-year chapter, I think. And it was this evolution that has been like the last month has been very profound for me business wise. And I feel like it was part of it, but it was, again, trusting my intuition. And usually it's kind of scary to cut your hair off after it's like down past your nipples. You've been growing out for 6 years, you know? Sorry, I added some stuff in there. It probably wasn't entirely relevant, but
I love this. Yeah. I fucking love this.
Okay.
So, and I really appreciate the courage. We've had a lot of guests on that have talked about courage, and courage is actually one of our tenets that if you're going to get out of your own way, it does require courage. You have to make new choices. And I've really loved can you make a choice where you feel the fear, where logically it makes zero sense? So I think it's a good segue to talk about what you're doing now, because one of the things you mentioned and in just the deep dive that stands out to me the most is that there was this future that you might not have been able to see, where you couldn't imagine that it was this good. And if that is true, you probably, while seeing the good possibilities, had to step into fear or do things that logically made zero sense. Maybe you hadn't done before, had no experience in. So it's a segue into your working world now. I also would love to hear moments where you've done that in the relationship sense, where it has been so amazing that now it's part of your business.
No. Okay. We'll have to, the relationship side, we'll have to wrap back in to make sure I cover it, because I think that there's a lot there with the transition. So me leaving my job as a police officer, I was arrested 4 times between 13 and 18. I had horrible experiences with police. I grew up, I was the only white kid. NYPD beat the shit out of me at 16 years old. I chose to be the change I wish to see in the world. Like that was it. It was ingrained in me by my cousin who babysat me as a kid. And so when it came time where, I'm walking with my friends at night and I'm the only white kid and the police stop us and they treat me better than they treat my friends. And then all these series of events that took place, it was like, this is what I'm doing in my life. So to then 5 years after I applied to 50 plus police departments, got denied from all of them because of my record. Right. I finally get this job. I'm pretty much I've become one of the best in the department, and I'm about to walk away with no idea what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. Absolutely clueless. So when I ended up moving back to college, like where I went to college in Buffalo, to be closer to like some familiarity and friends, and very quickly saw an online webinar for some entrepreneurial community, swiped my credit card pretty much immediately. Oh gosh. Okay. So because we're talking about intuition, so I'm going to try to combine these if I can. I never knew what intuition really was. I never used that word, but as a police officer, when I turned the block, I knew whether a dude was going to run, try to fight us, try to shoot us. I knew pretty much every time. And it saved my life and my guys' lives a lot of times because it was just always right. I called it a gut feeling, a gut instinct. I knew what car to pull over that we'd end up, like if we wanted to go out and just get a gun and come back and relax for the rest of the day, I knew what car first to pull over, and I was right pretty much almost every time. It was crazy. But when I left, I found myself in Buffalo, and my truck wouldn't fit in my friend's driveway that we were staying with, so I had to park it at the Dollar General, like 8 blocks away. We're in the middle of Buffalo, dead of winter. I'm having to walk home every night from leaving my car my truck in the parking lot. And as I was walking home every night, I just had this like overwhelming feeling of like something great is coming. I don't know what it is, but something great is coming. And I would just be walking in this blizzard by myself down the street, feeling this way, even though nothing makes sense. Like, I don't know where my life is going. And I'd go home to my ex and I'd be like, listen, I'm just letting you know, because like when it happens, I want to be able to say, like I told you. And so we watched this webinar. I'm like, this is it. Like, I don't know why, like this doesn't seem like it's it, but this is it. I got in, and the first video I watch is of my now business partner doing a training video. His name is Joey, then TC. And he was a police officer at the time. I just walked away. So now we got common ground. I slide into his DMs, very bro-y message, right?
Nice. Perfect.
Yeah. And him and I end up using the rest of my money to buy a ticket to London to see him speak on stage and meet him in person. We end up becoming best friends, traveling the world throughout 2019 together, building our businesses and helping this other company. I basically like worked my way into the leader circle in that company and started helping them scale and working with them. And so this intuition, right? Like I started to be like, oh, okay, like that's what this is. Like it's been right. I'm like, oh, this is what I felt as a police officer. Oh, I actually have a huge track record of this being right. So that reflection's big, right? Because there's probably so many times where we have felt something intuitive and followed it, but because it didn't take this long process for us to think about and didn't turn bad, that we didn't give it value and we didn't let it stack as evidence to trust that intuition. And so I think that the reflection on that is big because there's probably more times you've trusted your intuition and it was right than times where you ignored it. And right. So I'm losing my train of thought here with where I wanted it to go at the end with the original question. Come on.
Well, let me I'll re-engage because I think your point is super. You said it so fast and fluidly that it needs to be said again, that if we actually evaluate the number of times our intuition is correct, that doesn't mean we're looking for like miracles and magic. We're just looking for a small tally of this was a good choice. Whether it had a magnificent outcome is a different question. I do think that we have a tendency to over-exaggerate negative intuition reads or compromise where we disagree with our intuition and make a choice in dissent of it. And we just magnify like, oh, I should have trusted it. But then we don't have enough intentional thought to say, oh, but every time I actually have trusted it, it's been great. So we just ride this emotional negligence wave where our intuition doesn't have value. And when we talk about trusting our gut, I find that what makes my gut hardest to trust is not my gut, it's my mind. Like, there's never been a moment where I'm like, oh, well, my gut's wrong. No, I just let my mind win.
It's okay. So this is where the time between feeling the intuition and taking the action is very important, because if you wait and you give your logical mind time to talk you out of it and to gain power, then it is less likely that you're going to be able to follow your intuition.
So what I'm hearing is, if we want to get better at intuition and intuiting a choice, what we've really got to do is maximize the intuition by making a choice immediately when we feel it.
Yep. Not so immediate action.
That's good. Yep. That's good.
It's worked out for me so well, you know? Yeah. You brought up something there. I don't know if you want to take it in the direction of a relationship, but I'll let you. Sorry.
No, please. If something's coming up, let's go.
I think for me, where I ignored my intuition for maybe too long was in that relationship that I was in. You know, we were together 5 years, and we were engaged in a wedding that we were planning, all sorts of stuff. And, you know, she moved up to Buffalo with me after I left the job as a police officer, and we spent 8-9 months trying to heal, just do all the work that we could together. And it was like I was making loads of progress, but her behavior towards me wasn't changing. The resentment was so strong, and the attraction was just gone. And it felt like it was impossible to get back. And so there was so many times where I had conversations with her where like I knew like this probably needed to end, but I ignored it. And I drew it out for a lot longer than probably necessary. And, you know, it ended up obviously being the best thing for both of us, but that's somewhere where I think a lot of people ignore their intuition. And I think that's because our ego gets involved so deeply, where between validation, fear of rejection, and scarcity, which is like there's 8 billion people in the world, and we somehow have scarcity around love and relationships. And so that was somewhere that I felt like I ignored my intuition, and I ended up single for 2 years. And that was where I ended up moving a little bit more intuitively with my not dating, like really like how I wanted to go about the internal work. And so I just like had this really strong gut feeling that even though I just got to Scottsdale and just moved to Scottsdale from Barcelona, that I should not date at all. That was like an intuitive, just gut feeling that my logical brain was like, no, you just got to Scottsdale. You're a good looking dude. There's beautiful women everywhere. Like, you need to be out there. What? Yeah. But my gut just told me like, stay alone, do the work. And so that was, that led me down a whole different road.
I've had similar histories, and I've had both sides of the intuition coin when it comes to relationships, staying in too long and exiting too early. Like there have been times where I think out of not feeling worthy or lovable, I've terminated something that probably intuitively was good. I was just terrified. And then other times stayed in because I was afraid to be alone or afraid of dealing with the consequence of leaving or saying no and holding a boundary and asserting my value and knowing what I wanted. And, it can go either way. I would love to know, when you think about how great it could be, and when we imagine a future that's bright and successful, like, because we all do that, we all want more, and our intuition comes in and we're like excited about the moment. Maybe we can feel it in our gut. And no matter how courageous we are, there's this flood of fear. And you may not, if you don't have the time or the awareness to say like, okay, I'm going to make the immediate action, or maybe the circumstance just doesn't allow for that. How do you navigate that? How do you figure out what to do when fear is high? This is coming from somebody that you've had moments where fear was high for minutes, if not hours, in predicaments that are life-threatening. So how do you ride the wave long enough to get back to intuition if you can't make the choice right then?
It's a really good question. It's hard to associate my past experience with fear as far as a police officer with that, because I think that you don't really have that option in those scenarios, right? You just have to lean in, because any hesitation can get you killed. So that probably trained me really well to take that step fast, right? But I think as far as like, if you end up taking time and letting your logical brain talk you through, potentially out of it, and it just drags out and increases the time between intuitive feeling and an action that's in alignment with that feeling. I think the way to get back to it is asking, like, the question, like formulating a question in your mind and in your third eye, and like sitting with it and asking a question that would allow you, that intuition to kind of give you the guidance again. I feel like the actual ability to deal with the fear when it gets that strong can be, it does get very, very difficult the longer that you wait. And I don't know if I've dealt with it enough, like where I've given myself the opportunity enough to really figure out how to get back to it, besides now through a spiritual practice. I really think like meditation and now prayer, which is very new to me, but has been this interesting journey I've been on for the last few months. That seems to be like the easiest way to bring back the feeling. And then it's still a matter of being able to take action right after.
Yeah. Well, I can appreciate the practice that you're referencing. When I think about relationships and entrepreneurship, both of which have such a long game attached to them, I am reminded of significant choices that were intuitive that I couldn't necessarily act on right then, or involved other people, or the spark of an idea, or the sentimentality of a hey, are we gonna get together? Are we gonna be committed to each other? Or even to go from first date to second date, or kiss at the end of the day. Like, there's so many different examples where you might intuitively want to pounce on it now, but circumstances don't really align with that. And especially in entrepreneurship, my most recent 3 months has kind of been a sequencing of, I know what my gut says, but I cannot act on that right now. It's inappropriate to act on that right now, or it doesn't fit right now. So I need to come back to this, but I also have to get really good at making sure that nothing changes my mind, that my mind doesn't change my intuition.
That's really interesting. So here's where I think if it's truly in alignment and it's just a matter of time, then it's going to come up again. So like, even if you're like, you address it, you acknowledge it, like, absolutely, I love you, I agree with you as an idea, just not right now, then and you actually continue moving the way that you are, eventually that feeling is going to just become stronger, and it's like, oh, it's probably time. But then also, it also begs the question of why not now? Like, why is it coming up now, but it's not in alignment? Is it not in alignment? Is it not right now? Or is it just that there's obstacles in the way that you feel like you can't move and haven't actually thought through enough how to go about that? But I know exactly the type of thought you're talking about. And I do agree that there's absolutely times where you have this feeling and you can't act on it right now. Right. This is so interesting. I feel like it's a whole different conversation to dive into, because it's probably another hour or two worth of it, because the whole navigating business intuitively has actually just recently led me. I had part ownership in 4 different companies just like 3 different months ago. I ended up stepping away from 2 of them solely because of an intuitive feeling. I didn't have clarity yet. And like, as soon as I made the decision, the clarity came, and I'm now looking at probably definitely my biggest month as an entrepreneur. And it was off of following intuition. That was scary. It was very scary when the decision that I made. So it's interesting. I feel like there's so much to unpack in all of this.
To me, that's certainly not coincidence. The way I define clarity, the way that we've defined it in Get Out of Your Own Way, all of our coaching, our retreats, is the clarity is the removal of undesirable options. And I think the reason that definition stands for us is that most of what I've heard clarity defined as is very binary. I either have it or I don't. So it's not an action. I can't do it. That definition allows you to do and to make some kind of motion. But if I think about these moments in my life where I felt clear, what has stood the test of time via that definition is that it was like a very small picture, hyper defined. It wasn't a very big amalgamation of all the pieces of my life. It was just like a laser pointer on the wall saying, go here, and the rest doesn't matter. Not everything matters, and this is what the whole piece looks like. It almost has been a journey of less.
Brilliant.
That my life has gotten better and better through less.
Interesting. So what I heard when you were describing that, and like the small picture that's super defined, is go as far as you can see, and then you can go further. Right? Like that is really what you're doing in a way. Is like you're taking whatever clarity you have and you're just moving with that. But it's interesting. And then you're still utilizing that clarity to get the results that you want in your life, which is super powerful, because you don't need the whole picture, which I think is what a lot of people get hung up on. It's like, I need to understand it all. I need to understand the full picture. And almost it's like perfectionism that's really just procrastination.
It is. Dang. Say it. Shots fired.
Yeah.
So now you're doing a lot of work in relationship land.
Yes.
That is a very scientific way of saying that. I want to know a little bit more. I also wanted to understand how intuition plays into that work.
It's interesting because as we were talking, I was thinking about like, I actually don't feel like I use my intuition that much in my relationship now. But we'll see if there's anything that comes up. Because I spent two and a half years single, and that entire time was really just me healing and me growing and evolving and shedding a lot of like what I picked up along the way when the world got its hands around my neck, and then I'd pop into dating here and there, and I'd find that I was just really like feeling I realized later that I just needed to be validated and like feel like I still got it. Because every time I'd pop into dating, I'd be like, I probably should have just stayed home. I probably should have not done that. Like I wasn't ready. And every time I tried to test and see if I was ready, I found that I just wasn't. And then I spent like 7 weeks in Mexico by myself in the jungle, come home, and I'm like, oof, it's time. Like I feel it intuitively, right? I'm like, and just like energetically, I feel very good about myself. I feel like I've come a long way. I, kind of check these boxes for myself where I'm willing to give someone else my energy right now if they come in and amplify my life. And very quickly, within like 2 months of dating, I met my now girlfriend, Donna. And that was the definition of like, you can only do so much work on your own. I feel like I did a lot of the work I could on my own, and almost to the point of like, I'm not sure what else to work on. But as soon as I got in the relationship, it was just a whole different level of work that immediately was put in my face. I was dating a very beautiful woman that, everywhere we go, she'd be getting hit on or like stared at, or like we'd be in the gym and we're not working out together. So I'd be watching dudes like literally work themselves up to go hit on her. And then I'd watch them go shoot their shot if they actually built up themselves enough to go do it.
Oh, man.
So I'm just,
so all your insecurities are like flaring up.
Yeah. Dudes that are way bigger than me, just like walking over, trying to hit on her. Right. Like, and so there was a lot that was coming out very quickly that I had to navigate. Not only that, but she was very deep in her masculine. And so we were butting heads like way more than I would have liked. And the work that we were both faced with immediately was overwhelming, to the point where I think most people would have just turned around and walked the other way. But there was something, and like internally, I don't know if it was intuition. I can't tell you if it was intuition or not. There was a feeling of like, you just got to lean in. You just got to do the work.
Sounds like intuition to me.
Because it really, and this is something that I tell all my clients, like, you can either work through this in this relationship and grow and heal right now, or you're going to be forced to in the next one. So why not now? Why not do it with someone that you actually love? And like, do you want to go back to dating? Do you want to go back to this? You're gonna have to do it all over again. Let's just move through it. Put the ego aside. And so that's what we did. And it took so many different layers of me and of stepping up and taking more responsibility for my own actions, my own emotions, my own responses and reactions, triggers, insecurities. Like at that point, like there's all you can do is outwork it. Like I really felt like that was all I could do was really stand in the mirror, which I did a lot, and have conversations with myself until I worked through it. And I think it probably took, I ended up hiring a coach, which I always had coaches and mentors on all sorts of stuff, but in this specific area, just like I needed somebody who was unbiased to just hear me out and call me out of my bullshit. And because I just like, we're so smart. We could talk ourselves through anything in our head, right? I'm like, I just need to be super honest with somebody else and have them mirror back to me like the lies or like the poor perspectives, all of that. And through that, started to really learn why there was so much clash. And it was really because like she was deep in her masculine. And at certain times, I thought that I was deep in my masculine, but I wasn't. Because we think that when we're feeling aggressive and emotional, like in a negative way, that's masculine. We have too much testosterone, but that's not the case at all. That is way too much estrogen. And that's why we feel so emotional. And so she's deep in her masculine. Somehow I found myself like in my feminine, like just a very emotional, reactive, and things of that nature. And it was just clashing. It was creating so much conflict and challenges for us that at a certain point, pretty early on, we just made the commitment. Like we're just going to do the work no matter what. Can't quit. We have to do the work. We don't want to go back to dating, right? We want to make this work. We do love each other. We have so much fun together, but there's insecurities, past traumas, childhood trauma, stuff with her dad, all sorts of stuff with my past relationships. And eventually, by me stepping up and leading, truly leading at different levels in the relationship, being more decisive, taking on more responsibility, and taking away any masculine, any things that she would have to do in the relationship that would be masculine, and taking them out as my responsibility, she started to finally ease into her feminine. And then we had a conversation around the dynamic. I was, diving into the actual history of relationships and how they've changed over the years, especially over the last 50, 60, 70 years, that we don't have like conscious, like we're not truly aware of. And it became so clear to me, like what was happening. Like she hadn't ever really been able to depend on a man before. She couldn't depend on her father. She couldn't depend on any of the long-term relationships that she had. She couldn't trust them. Eventually they hurt her. Eventually they lied. Eventually they didn't do what they said they were going to do. Eventually they showed their true colors and weren't who they said they were. And if a woman experiences that long enough, they then become independent. They choose to become independent and step into their masculine energy. And if it happens long enough, they'll get stuck there. And that's where they'll operate from predominantly. And just like putting the same side of trying to put the same side of two magnets together, masculine, especially from the feminine, you can't touch them. They won't attract each other. They will repel each other. And that's what happens in relationships, especially now with how many women are stuck in their masculine energy because of those experiences. So it takes a man that's truly willing to step up and lead and continuously take responsibility to eventually lead her back to her feminine. And I think a big part of that is not taking responsibility for her healing, but taking responsibility for creating a safe space for her to heal in.
Yeah. It's a big distinction.
Correct. And that was probably the part for me that really kind of changed things for us. It was like, okay, the way that I respond and react is heavily going to determine whether or not the challenges perpetuate and continue, and her trauma either stays the same or gets worse, because now I'm going to associate myself with the negative emotions of these memories, or I'm going to take responsibility for my reactions, how I respond, how well I listen, if I interrupt, if I try to offer solutions, all these things that end up not actually getting me what I want. And if I can do that and I can focus on just improving there eventually I will facilitate the healing that she needs for us to be in a beautiful, healthy, fulfilling, harmonious relationship. And by taking that responsibility, that's exactly what happened. Yeah.
When you're working with individuals, couples, men?
So I tried to niche down to just men, but it didn't work. Like the women who are stuck in their masculine, I'm just like attracting them as well. So now, and I am working with couples. So now it's really men, women, and couples.
Okay. So when navigating this, I love how full circle this is becoming. And you're trying to offer a new behavior and then let the old behavior become overgrown. There's going to be a natural resistance and challenge to some of that, right? It might not be complex or complicated. It's just hard. How are you able to support them in making the new choice at a distance? And how are you also able to push them, right? The support being much more gentle and the push being like, hey, we got to go. How do you think about those two things?
That's where intuition comes in big time for me.
Hey, I thought we might get there.
Full circle on. Oh yeah. My coaching is insanely intuitive. Like I've just kind of found my own style with it and it's interesting because I had to go through all my testimonials, my video testimonials recently. And I noticed that every single person spoke to my integrity and like actually delivering on my promise and my ability to balance tough love with grace. And so I can't give you a structure because it is so intuitive, but there very much is a balance. And I think it comes down to me reading their energy and like really where they're at to figure out what is going to help them take the action. So I think a big part of it, like to give an example, a lot of relationships that have like baggage, they've got some negative history, whether the man lied early on or somebody cheated and they worked through it. Maybe the girl entertained a man, or whatever the case is, whatever the event is, forgiveness is something that people really struggle with. And it is, their ego has such a strong grip around their heart that it is such a hard thing to get them to let go of. But when people are ready, they're ready. It's the people that like really want to hold on to it because it's become a part of their story and a part of their identity that they've like adopted, that I really have to like continuously like, nope, we're going this way. Nope, we're going this way. And it either, for me, in my experience, it either is very quick or it takes a lot of repetition. And with that, the longer it takes, the more tough love and like the balance of the grace gets more difficult to figure out which one is right, because neither of them are really like working that fast. Yeah, so it's tough. There's not really a full framework. Again, it's very intuitive, but that's an example of when it's even more difficult, is when dealing with forgiveness and resentment.
Yeah, you're chiseling away at a big block.
Yeah,
I would say.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, please. I want to hear that.
I was just going to say there's a lot to unpack here, so it's even interesting to try to figure out what to share, and there's so many roads off of just one sentence.
Yeah, it's deep, man. And you and I are probably very similar in that tactically, there's a lot of architecture in the coaching. Organizationally, though, it's led by intuition. An intuition-led tactic has much more adaptability than something that is just pure tactics, right? If I just say like, hey, do this, but I haven't really intuited what's going to fit where you are or how to deliver that based on your energy and emotions, then the tactic falls often very, very, very short or creates the wrong kind of like frustration and adoption in the first place. I learned all that coaching for about 12 years. I coached girls soccer professionally. And
oh, wow.
It was a lot of training on the job of, you know, how to read where someone is, how to be a bit more gentle, especially as a man, coaching girls who were sometimes as young as 11 all the way up to like 17, 18. And I think what intuition has meant in that container, to bring the other loop back into all this, is that you can't explain why until someone understands that you care. And intuition is a great way to relate that there's care first. And there were players that I knew I could push, but they had to know that I cared, and they had to know that I believed in them first.
So
then I could push, and I could be accountable, and I could be supportive. I could be all the things, but that had to happen first. And I think that's still true as a coach today.
That's so good. That's like, you know, me, I do sales completely different than most people. I'll get on and I'm like, hey, so like what I really love to do is just kind of give you some of my background and what got me here so you know who you're talking to. And I open up and I let them know like some shit like that I've dealt with and get vulnerable with them. And it makes it so they immediately open up to me and we can dive so much faster. But it's because I was vulnerable with them first. So you showing that you care, it's not from a place of criticism. They don't receive that energy in a negative manner. So it really opens up that door, which I think is huge, especially for women, because if they have a negative relationship with their father, then a lot of times they don't receive criticism well because they don't receive masculine energy well. And so them knowing that you care first, it changes the dynamic and they receive it in a different way. So that was huge, which you intuitively decided to do, huh?
Intuition for the win.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. It's cool that we have a lot of lines of intersection. You know, I'm always intrigued by what coaching means because it's got such a width, and it's fun to go tit for tat in the realm of intuition when it comes to coaching. I find that my saga of difficulties and strain and stresses have often created an education around what it means to listen and be listened to. You know, as a coach, I think this is just something I'm learning in the last 2 years. I listen for a living and I have hard conversations for a living. And sometimes what I crave the most is to be listened to. And my intuition has kind of been a great gift to like just pour in and listen. And one of the things that has grown out of this most recently is that I've also have to and have had to learn to turn off my intuition long enough to just talk and share for myself. Because otherwise my listening antenna are always up and I'm never in, hey, can I just share what I'm experiencing too?
Interesting. The energy, the level of my ability to read energy at one point in my probably healing journey became so intense that like I could feel incongruencies in between in people, like of what they were saying and what they were feeling. And I could feel how incongruent it was, that it made me feel so uncomfortable that it was hard to be around those people. I almost had to create distance. And so that became so loud that like I would just listen and not share because I was so distracted by their energy. So it's a little bit different, but like the it ended up in the same thing. It was like where I just like wasn't sharing. And so I wouldn't share or like talk around certain people. And then that me not wanting to talk around them made me not want to be around them because I couldn't really like be myself.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Totally does, man. Yeah. I think having a natural propensity to listen and to intuit and to interpret and feel what other people are going through is a tremendous gift. And the hardest lesson, it's the same thing with like givers and boundaries. The hardest thing to do is to turn it off, right? Givers are great. And I think giving is important. I'm a giver through and through. The hardest lesson I've had and the most empowering lesson I've had is install boundaries. Give and give limitlessly to the boundary. Hard lesson.
Yeah. I feel like I am still learning that, but I just haven't needed to learn it the hard way. Cause I'm like in such this energy of giving right now. Just wanting to give and to give for free. Like probably because I'm closing clients and doing well in business. Like I want to do it even more, but even recently that kind of led to a moment where I'm like, that may not have served him. That may not have served that person by giving them so much, right? Without there being an exchange of energy, because then it can be devalued. So that's a lesson I'm still learning.
Many ahead, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So let's sort of weave a through line here.
Okay.
Intuition's been a big theme today. And this idea of change through your experience losing your partner, through leaving SWAT and leaving a career, all the way to relationships and here, intuition, big theme, but also this idea that once you knew that it wasn't right for you, you left and you dealt with the discomfort of the leaving. I think it's easy to sort of gloss over that, but I want to honor that because the way that you described these stories, it's easy to say it fast. I am positive that it came at its own cost. Mm-hmm. And I really appreciate digging as deep as we did to learn about what some of these inflection points were in your life and then track them all the way to today where you're able to look back on them and use them as tools for others to help individuals get through their own pain and get out of their own challenges and strife and patterns. I also am really loving that courage was the solution and sort of the complement to intuition, that if we have intuition, then the best way to leverage it is just to be courageous and lean into it. Does anything come up just in summation when it comes to intuition and courage?
What comes up, I don't know how much in alignment it is, but what is coming up is that I made a decision 15 months ago that was intuitive, and it hasn't worked out yet. It still to this day, right? It required courage, a lot of courage, because there was a lot of risk that came with it. And to this day, it still has not worked out, but I anchor myself back in the original feeling and know that I made the right choice and it eventually is going to work out. And so I just have to continue to trust my intuition and have the courage to continue on the path I chose instead of trying to turn the other way because it hasn't panned out in the time frame in which I had expected it to.
Yes. You and I are walking similar paths. Almost similar timelines too. But if I have lived by the quote, it all works out in the end. And if it hasn't worked out, it ain't the end.
Yes, sir.
Dylan, this was an awesome conversation. I'm so glad. I appreciate your shares, and I appreciate how we meandered and still got somewhere amazing with intuition.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me on. The intuition thing I did not expect, and I feel like there was so many things battling for attention in my mind with some of the stuff you're talking about because there's so much to unpack that I may have not been able to communicate some of the things clearly, but hopefully there's some golden nuggets in there for everybody who listens in.
I'm sure there is, because I got many myself, selfishly. If someone wants to learn more and they're like, you know what, I actually did get some golden nuggets, how can they reach you? How can they find you?
Dylan J. Warter everywhere. DYLAN JWARTER. So .com, Instagram, Facebook, pretty much everywhere.
I'd say if you're a person with a heart, you deserve to give Dylan a follow. The stuff you've been sharing lately is amazing, and I appreciate everything that you're doing. And clearly, after today's conversation, we can learn a lot from Dylan's intuition and way of relating to change, and in many ways, getting out of your own way. It's pretty cool to see, to hear, and share some space with you, brother. Thank you.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate you.